I was restoring a manor 3 states away when my neighbor, Mrs. Jones, called to ask why movers were emptying my house. My parents had forged my signature to sell my home and pay my brother's debts, so I initiated a legal audit they never expected. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The vibration of my phone against the scaffolding felt like an intrusion. I was 30 feet in the air, balancing on a narrow plank while carefully removing layers of century-old varnish from a crown molding. This was my sanctuary, the smell of sawdust, the quiet concentration, the distance from the chaotic noise of the modern world. I was a historic home restoration specialist, a job that required patience, a steady hand, and often months spent living out of a suitcase in states far from home. I wiped a smudge of dust from my safety goggles and glanced at the screen. Mrs. Jones. My stomach gave a strange, involuntary lurch. Mrs. Jones was my neighbor back in Ohio, a sweet but strictly private woman in her 70s who spent her days tending to her prize-winning hydrangeas. She had my number for emergencies only: fire, flood, or blood. In the 4 years I had lived next to her, she had called me exactly once, and that was to tell me a delivery truck had clipped my mailbox. I pulled off my heavy work glove, my fingers stiff, and swiped to answer. "Hello, Mrs. Jones, is everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the sudden spike in my heart rate. "Alice, honey," her voice crackled over the line, thin and trembling. "I didn't want to disturb you at work, I know you're away, but the noise is just terrible, and I was worried about your rose bushes." I frowned, bracing myself against the wall. "Noise? What noise? I'm in Georgia, Mrs. Jones. No one should be at my house." There was a pause on the other end, a silence so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. When she spoke again, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Alice, there are 2 large trucks in your driveway. The sold sign went up on the lawn 3 days ago, but I thought you knew. Well, I saw your father letting the men in this morning. They've been carrying out furniture for hours." The world tilted. I actually reached out and grabbed the molding I had been sanding to keep from falling off the scaffold. "Sold sign," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Mrs. Jones, tell me exactly what you see." "It's quick move reality, dear, and, oh my, they just brought out that beautiful oak dining table you restored last Christmas. Alice, your father is standing right there with a clipboard." I waved at him, but he just turned his back. My vision blurred. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck, instantly chilling me despite the humidity of the Georgia summer. My house. My craftsman bungalow that I had bought as a wreck and spent 4 years lovingly restoring with my own hands. Every tile, every floorboard, every fixture was something I had sourced and installed. It was the only thing in the world that was truly, legally mine. "Mrs. Jones," I said, my voice sounding unrecognizable like it was coming from underwater. "Thank you for calling. Please, if you can, just take a picture, just one picture, and don't let them see you." "I already have, dear. I'll send it now." I hung up. A moment later, my phone pinged. The photo was blurry, taken through a window screen, but it was clear enough. There was the truck. There was the open front door of my sanctuary. And there, standing on my porch, looking imperious and commanding in his beige windbreaker, was my father, Cameron. He was pointing at my sofa, directing a stranger to haul it away. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a sensation I had never experienced before, a complete physical hollowing out, as if my internal organs had turned to ice. I wasn't just being robbed. I was being erased. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness. It was a deliberate execution of my life by the people who were supposed to protect it. I descended the scaffolding with mechanical precision, my muscle memory taking over where my brain had short-circuited. I unclipped my safety harness, placed my tools in their designated slots in my kit, and walked out of the restoration site to my rental car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the door. Once inside the stifling heat of the car, the reality hit me like a physical blow. I slumped over the steering wheel, gasping for air. They sold it. They actually sold it. I grabbed my phone again. My fingers flew across the screen, dialing the number for my mother, Brenda. It rang and rang and rang. "Hi, you've reached Brenda. Leave a message." Her cheery voicemail greeting felt like a slap in the face. I hung up and dialed Cameron, straight to voicemail. I dialed Jeremiah, my brother. The line was busy. Of course it was. I sat back, forcing myself to breathe. Panic was rising in my throat, a sour, bile-filled tide. I needed information. I needed to know how this was even possible. I was the sole owner. My name was on the deed. My name was on the mortgage. I hadn't signed anything. I pulled up my banking app. I checked my mortgage status. Loan status, payoff pending. The words stared back at me, innocent and horrifying. Someone had initiated a closing. Someone had triggered a payoff. I dialed my parents' landline, a number they rarely used but kept for emergencies. To my shock, my mother picked up on the second ring. "Hello," her voice was breathless, distracted. I could hear clinking in the background, like silverware being moved. "Mom," I said. The single word came out strangled. "Alice," she sounded surprised but not happy. There was a weird, frantic energy in her tone. "Alice, honey, I can't talk right now. We're having a bit of a family crisis. We're very busy." "A crisis?" I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "Does this crisis involve movers emptying my house in Ohio while I'm in Georgia?" Silence, absolute dead silence. Then she sighed. It wasn't a sigh of guilt. It was the sigh of a parent dealing with a toddler who refused to eat their peas. "Oh, Alice, don't be dramatic," Brenda said, her voice shifting into that familiar, dismissive tone I had known my whole life. "We didn't want to worry you while you were on your little work trip. You know how stressed you get." "Stressed?" I whispered, my voice rising in pitch. "Mom, Mrs. Jones says there is a sold sign on my lawn. Dad is loading my furniture onto a truck. What have you done?" "We did what had to be done," she snapped, her facade cracking. "Jeremiah is in trouble, Alice. Real trouble this time. He needs liquidity immediately. We couldn't wait for you to come back and hem and haw about your space. You're never there anyway. You're always traveling for those dusty old houses. We made an executive decision for the family." "You sold my house," I said, the words spacing out, slow and heavy. "You forged my signature." "We utilized the power of attorney you signed 3 years ago when you went to Europe," she countered triumphantly. "We are your parents. We know what's best. And frankly, it's selfish of you to hoard a 3-bedroom asset when your brother is facing legal complications. We'll discuss the details when you get back. We put your personal things in a storage unit. The cheap one on 5th Street. Now, I have to go. The notary is here for the final transfer." "Mom, don't you click." She hung up. I stared at the phone, the screen turning black. They thought I was helpless. They thought that because I was the quiet one, the one who worked with wood and stone instead of people, the one who always fixed things, that I would just accept this. They thought the power of attorney from 3 years ago, a limited document I had signed solely so they could sign for packages while I was in Italy, was their golden ticket. But as the initial shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity, I remembered something. I opened my glove compartment and dug through the messy stack of papers I kept with me. Registration, insurance, old receipts. And there, at the bottom, a blue folder. Inside was a copy of the revocation letter I had filed with the county clerk 2 years ago, right after I caught Jeremiah trying to use my credit card. I had officially revoked that power of attorney. I had sent a certified copy to my parents, which they had signed for. They had forgot, or they simply didn't care, assuming I wouldn't have the spine to use it against them. "They think I'm still the daughter who just wants to please them," I said to the empty car. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just a restorer, I was a researcher. I knew how to find paper trails, and I knew how to bury people with them. To understand why my parents would strip mine my life to save my brother, you have to understand Jeremiah. Jeremiah was 6 years younger than me. He was born when my parents had started making real money, and he was the prince of the household. He was charming, handsome, and completely incapable of taking responsibility for a single action in his life. When we were kids, if Jeremiah broke a vase, it was because I distracted him. If he failed a test, it was because the teacher was unfair. As adults, the pattern simply became more expensive. I had worked since I was 16. I paid for my own college. I built my career from the ground up, starting as a mesmerizing apprentice and working my way up to a lead specialist. My house, that bungalow on Elm Street, was the physical manifestation of my hard work. I bought it as a foreclosure. It had holes in the roof, mold in the basement, and raccoons in the attic. For 4 years, every weekend and every spare dollar went into that house. I sanded the floors by hand until my fingerprints were gone. I hunted down period-correct brass hardware. I reglazed the original windows. It wasn't just a house, it was my masterpiece. Jeremiah, on the other hand, had ventures. He had a crypto phase that cost my parents $20,000. He had a luxury sneaker resale business that ended with a lawsuit. He had a DJ career that resulted in nothing but noise complaints and a wrecked van. And through it all, Brenda and Cameron enabled him. My mother, Brenda, was a woman obsessed with appearances. She was the head of the church social committee, a woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and spoke in a soft, melodic voice that masked a core of steel trap manipulation. To her, family meant protecting the image. Jeremiah's failures were cracks in the image that had to be plastered over, usually with money. My father, Cameron, was a retired insurance adjuster. He was a man who believed the world owed him something. He was loud, blustering, and deeply chauvinistic. He viewed my career as a cute hobby and my independence as a personal insult. He often joked at family dinners that I needed to find a husband so I could stop playing with hammers. But the real toxicity wasn't just their spoiling of Jeremiah. It was the active predation on me to sustain him. Over the years, the loans they asked for became demands. The guilt trips became ultimatums. "You have so much, Alice," Brenda would say, eyeing my savings account. "Jeremiah just needs a leg up." But this was an escalation I hadn't seen coming. I sat in the rental car, piecing together the timeline. Jeremiah must have gotten into deep water. Legal complications, Brenda had said. That usually meant debt sharks or fraud. To bail him out, they needed a massive injection of cash. My house, sitting empty while I was away, must have looked like a piggy bank waiting to be smashed open. The antagonist here wasn't just the act of selling the house. It was the dynamic itself. It was Jeremiah, likely whining to them right now about how unfair his life was. It was Cameron, puffing his chest out, feeling like the patriarch solving a problem by sacrificing the expendable child's assets. And it was Brenda, rationalizing the crime as an act of maternal love. I thought about the buyer mentioned on the phone, who buys a house in 3 days. I pulled up the listing online. It had been listed on Zillow 4 days ago. Cash only, quick close, as is. The price was suspiciously low, at least $50,000 under market value. They were fire selling my life. And then I saw the agent listed. Jeremiah Vance. My brother wasn't a real estate agent, but he had briefly studied for the license a year ago before quitting. Had he faked that too, or was he listing it for sale by owner using my identity? The level of fraud was staggering. Identity theft, forgery, real estate fraud. I looked at the photo Mrs. Jones had sent again. Cameron was smiling. He actually looked proud. He was selling my favorite dining table, probably for pennies on the dollar, to clear space for the new owners. I felt the tears finally dry up, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. They wanted a restoration. Fine, I would strip them down to the studs. I didn't storm out of the rental car. I didn't throw my phone. I sat there in the oppressive Georgia heat, and I let the cold logic of my profession take over. In restoration, when you find rot in a load-bearing beam, you don't paint over it. You expose it, you brace the structure, and you cut it out. My first call wasn't to the police. It was to Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a real estate attorney back in Ohio, a man with a shark's grin and a pit bull's tenacity. I had worked with him on 2 historical preservation easements. He wasn't cheap, but he was lethal. "Alice," he answered on the second ring, "I thought you were in Savannah saving some antebellum molding." "I need to hire you. Immediately. On a retainer," I said, my voice sounding frighteningly calm even to my own ears. "My parents are currently attempting to close a sale on my primary residence using a power of attorney I revoked 2 years ago. Movers are on site. They claim the closing is imminent." I heard the distinct sound of a chair squeaking as Marcus sat up straighter. The jovial tone vanished. "Revoked, you have the filing." "I have the stamped copy from the county clerk in my glove box," I confirmed. "I need you to stop the sale. I need you to freeze everything." "Okay, listen to me," Marcus said, his voice dropping into rapid-fire legal mode. "If they are sing today or tomorrow, we need to file a lease pendens immediately. That puts a cloud on the title. No title company in America will insure the transfer if there's pending litigation. It freezes the property dead in its tracks. I can have that filed electronically within the hour. But Alice, if the money has already changed hands, it gets messier." "Mom said the notary was there," I replied, checking the time. "Do it. File the lease pendens, and Marcus, I want a forensic accounting of the transaction. I want to know who the buyer is, who the title company is, and exactly whose bank account that money is wired to. Consider it done. I'll draft the complaint for fraud and forgery while I'm at it. You coming home?" "I'm leaving now." I hung up and started the engine. The drive from Savannah to Ohio was 10 hours. I did it in 9. For 9 hours, I didn't listen to music or podcasts. I drove in silence, fueling my adrenaline with caffeine and rage. But as the miles blurred, I used the time to dig. I had my iPad mounted on the dashboard, and while safely stopped at rest areas, I became a digital forensic investigator. I knew Jeremiah's passwords. He was lazy, and he used the same variation of his high school football jersey number for everything. I logged into his email first. It was a disaster zone of spam and overdue notices, but I searched for contract, loan, and urgent. And there it was. Not a loan from a bank, but a series of threatening emails from a user named Vinnie77. Subject, final notice, Jerry. Body, you're out of time. $80K by Friday or we contact your family. And by contact, we mean visit. $80,000. Jeremiah had gambled away $80,000 online. But then I found the second email chain. This one was between Jeremiah and my father, Cameron. From Cameron to Jeremiah subject, solved. Body, don't worry, son, your mother and I handled it. Alice's place is sitting there gathering dust anyway. We found a cash buyer, a flipper who wants a quick deal. We're using the POA, just keep your mouth shut until the wire hits. We'll tell her it was an eminent domain issue or something later. She's soft, she'll get over it. She's soft, I repeated aloud, the words bouncing off the windshield. They didn't just steal from me. They held a strategy meeting about it. They discussed my disposability. They assessed my worth as a human being and decided I was nothing more than an asset to be liquidated to save the golden child. I arrived in my town at 8:00 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the suburban streets. I turned onto Elm Street, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. There it was, my house. The sold sign was gone, the moving truck was gone, but the house looked wrong. The porch was empty, my rocking chairs were missing. The curtains in the front window were gone, leaving the house looking like a skull with hollow eyes. and in the driveway sat my parents' beige sedan. I didn't park in the driveway. I parked on the street, blocking them in. I walked up the path I had laid myself, stepping on the flagstones I had hand-selected from a quarry 3 years ago. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Why lock a house you've already sold? I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of my lavender diffusers or the old wood wax I used. It smelled of takeout food and cheap cologne, my father's cologne. The living room was half empty. My restored 1920s sofa was gone. My bookshelves were stripped, my collection of architectural history books boxed up and stacked haphazardly by the door. In the kitchen, sitting around my breakfast island, were Brenda, Cameron, and Jeremiah. They were eating pizza out of the box. There was a bottle of champagne, my champagne, a vintage bottle I had been saving for my wedding day, open on the counter. They looked up as I stepped into the archway. The silence that followed was absolute. Jeremiah froze, a slice of pepperoni pizza halfway to his mouth. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, but he was wearing a new watch. Brenda was the first to recover. She wiped her mouth with a napkin and stood up, smoothing her skirt. She put on that smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, the one she used when she was trying to return an item she had clearly broken. "Alice," she exclaimed, her voice pitching up an octave. We didn't expect you back so soon. We were just going to call you." "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. My voice was low, flat, and hard. It was the voice of a site foreman telling a crew that someone had just been fired. Cameron stood up, his face flushing red. "Now see here, Alice. Don't you come in here giving orders. We are your parents. We stepped in to handle a crisis because you were off playing in the dirt in Georgia." "You sold my house," I said, walking further into the room. I didn't look at Jeremiah. I kept my eyes locked. "Ked on Cameron." "We leveraged an asset," Cameron corrected, puffing out his chest. "Jeremiah was in trouble, serious trouble. We didn't have the liquidity, you do. We made a family decision. The sale closed this afternoon. The money is already in the escrow account, scheduled to wire to us tomorrow morning." "And where is my furniture?" I asked, looking at the empty space where my antique hutch used to be. "Storage," Brenda waved a hand dismissively. "Well, we sold some of the bigger pieces to the new owner. He wanted it furnished. We got a good price, Alice. You should be thanking us. You can move back in with us for a while, save some money. It's time you settled down anyway." I looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't scared. They were annoyed. They were annoyed that I was ruining their celebration. They genuinely believed that their authority as parents superseded the law. They believed that because I was their daughter, I was their property. "You used the power of attorney," I said. "Yes," Cameron said defiantly, "and thank God we had it." "The power of attorney I revoked 2 years ago," I said clearly. The room went still. Cameron's eyes flickered. Brenda froze. Jeremiah looked down at his pizza. "I don't know what you're talking about," Cameron blustered, but his voice lacked its usual boom. "We never received any revocation." "I have the certified mail receipt, Dad, signed by you. June 14th, 2024, I lied about the date, but I knew I had the receipt. And more importantly, I have the stamped filing from the county clerk." I took a step closer to the island. "But here is the part you're going to hate," I said, leaning my hands on the counter. "I called my lawyer 4 hours ago. We filed a lease pendens on this property. As of 4:30 p.m., the title is frozen. The sale cannot be recorded. And that wire transfer you're waiting for tomorrow morning, it's not coming. The title company has been notified of potential fraud. The escrow is locked." Jeremiah made a noise, a high, strangled whimper. He dropped the pizza. "What? No, Alice, you can't." "I already did," I said. "You stupid girl," Cameron shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The money isn't for us. It's for—" "For Vinnie," I interrupted. "For the $80,000 Jeremiah gambled away." Jeremiah went white. Brenda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. How did you? I know everything, I said. I know about the debt. I know you planned this via email. And I know you committed a felony today. You forged my signature on a closing document using a voided legal instrument. That is fraud. That is grand larceny. We are your family, Brenda shrieked, tears suddenly springing to her eyes, the weaponized tears I knew so well. How can you be so selfish? Your brother's life is at stake. These people. They will hurt him, Alice. They said they would break his legs. Then maybe he should have thought about that before he bet 80 grand he didn't have, I replied coldly. Fix it, Cameron growled, stepping around the island, looming over me. He used his physical size to intimidate, a tactic that had worked when I was 12. Call the lawyer, lift the Lee's pendants. Now, or so help me God, Alice, you will not have a family left. I looked up at him. I didn't flinch. I don't have a family, I said. I have thieves who broke into my house. The standoff in the kitchen was broken by the ringing of a cell phone. It was Jeremiah's. He looked at the screen and started shaking, visibly vibrating. He didn't answer it. Is that them? Cameron asked, his bluster vanishing, replaced by palpable fear. It's Vinnie, Jeremiah whispered. He wants the confirmation number for the wire. Tell him tomorrow, Brenda hissed. Tell him there was a bank delay. I can't, Jeremiah cried out, jumping up. He knows the house was the asset. If the sale doesn't go through, he looked at me, eyes wide and terrified. Alice, please, I'm begging you. They aren't kidding. Just let the sale go through. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. You've never paid back a dime in your life, Jeremiah, I said. Alice, look at me, Brenda pleaded, grabbing my arm. I recoiled from her touch. This is life or death. We can argue about the house later. We can argue about the money later. But right now, we need to save your brother. Are you really going to let him get hurt over a building? It's not a building, I said. It's my life. And you didn't just sell a building. You sold my trust. You sold my security. But as I looked at them, Jeremiah weeping, Brenda hysterical, Cameron pacing like a caged animal, I realized the trap I was in. If I held the line and Jeremiah actually got hurt, they would blame me forever. I would be the villain in the family narrative for the rest of time. Alice let her brother get beaten up over money. But if I gave in, I lost everything, my home, my equity, my dignity. I needed to change the battlefield. I won't lift the Lee's pendants, I said. You selfish bee, Cameron started. But, I raised my voice, cutting him off. I might have another solution. Who is the buyer? Cameron stopped. What does it matter? It matters, I said, because if the buyer is a flipper, he wants the house for the equity. If the buyer is one of Vinnie's guys, this is money laundering. Who is it? It's an LLC, Cameron admitted. QMR Holdings. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus again, putting him on speaker. Marcus, look up QMR Holdings in the state registry. Now. Alice, it's 9 p.m., Marcus grumbled, but I heard typing. A moment later, got it. Quick move reality. Registered agent is Vincent Morty. I looked at Jeremiah. Vinnie is the buyer. Jeremiah nodded, looking at the floor. He said he'd take the house as payment for the debt, plus another 20 grand in cash to me to walk away. The picture clicked into focus. It was worse than I thought. They weren't selling the house for market value to pay a debt. They were handing over a $400,000 asset to a loan shark to settle an $80,000 debt. My parents were literally giving away $300,000 of my equity to a criminal because they were too panicked to do math. You idiots, I breathed. You absolute idiots. My house is appraised at $450. You sold it to him for what? $100. It was the only way, Cameron shouted. Marcus, I said into the phone, the buyer is the loan shark. This is a predatory lending scheme and extortion. If we go to the police, the sale is void anyway as proceeds of crime. No police, Jeremiah screamed. Alice, no police. Vinnie will kill me if the cops get involved. Marcus, hold on, I said. I muted the phone. I looked at my family. They were pathetic. They had destroyed my sanctuary, invaded my privacy, and tried to rob me blind, all out of fear and incompetence. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice shaking with the effort of keeping it steady. "I am not lifting the freeze. The house stays mine, but I will not call the police on Vinnie. Yet." "Then what?" Brenda asked. "I'm going to talk to Vinnie," I said. "You can't," Cameron said. "He's dangerous." "So am I," I said. "I'm the woman whose house he's trying to steal. And unlike you three, I have a lawyer on the phone and a paper trail that can put him in prison for mortgage fraud, which the FBI takes very seriously. Vinnie wants money. He doesn't want a federal investigation." I looked at Jeremiah. "Give me the phone." Jeremiah hesitated. "Give me the damn phone, Jeremiah, or I call the cops right now and turn you in for forgery." He handed me the phone. It was still ringing. I answered. "Where is my money, Jerry?" a gravelly voice rasped. "Hello, Vincent," I said. "This is Alice, the owner of the house you're trying to steal. We need to talk." There was a pause. "I don't know who you are, lady. Put Jerry on." Jerry is indisposed, and the house is frozen. "My lawyer filed a lease pendens this afternoon. You aren't getting the title, and you aren't getting the house." "Listen, lady." "No, you listen," I snapped. "You are attempting to purchase a property via a fraudulent power of attorney. That is a RICO predicate act. I have a lawyer on the other line drafting an affidavit for the FBI. I know you don't want the feds looking at your books over a measly 80 grand. Silence. I had guessed right. Guys like Vinnie thrived in the shadows. They preyed on people like Jeremiah who wouldn't call the cops. They didn't know how to handle a woman who spoke the language of compliance and federal regulation. "What do you want?" Vinnie asked, his voice lower, dangerous. "You walk away from the house. You sign a release of the contract immediately. And in exchange, I don't send the file to the FBI. And the money Jerry owes me." "That's between you and Jerry," I said, looking at my brother. "But you aren't getting my house." "He has until noon tomorrow," Vinnie said, "or he loses a thumb." Click. I handed the phone back to Jeremiah. "You have until noon," I said. "Alice," Brenda wailed, "you didn't fix it, you just made it worse." "I saved my house," I said. "Now, you three have 12 hours to figure out how to pay your debts without using my assets. And while you do that, you're going to get out." "Out," Cameron blinked. "Get out of my house," I said, pointing to the door. "Get out, take your pizza, take your champagne, and get off my property." "You can't kick us out, it's late," Brenda cried. "I can," I said, "because if you aren't gone in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police to report 3 trespassers. And considering you forged a legal document today, I don't think you want to talk to the police." I stared them down. The power dynamic had shifted. The scared little girl who wanted their approval was gone, in her pla. C was the homeowner. Cameron glared at me, his face purple, but he grabbed his keys. Brenda sobbed, grabbing her purse. Jeremiah looked at me like I was a monster. "I hope you're happy," Jeremiah spat as he walked past me. "I'm not," I said, "but I'm home." I watched them drive away. Then I locked the door, slid down against it, and finally, for the first time in 10 hours, I let myself cry. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. But it wasn't over. The house was safe, but the war wasn't. I knew my parents. They wouldn't just accept defeat. They would try to spin this. They would try to destroy my reputation. And I still had to deal with the fact that my parents had signed my life away for a slice of pepperoni pizza. The morning sun didn't bring relief. It brought the heavy, suffocating pressure of a deadline. Noon. That was the time Vinnie had given Jeremiah. I sat on the floor of my empty living room, drinking coffee from a paper cup I'd found in my car. My furniture was gone, my curtains were gone, but the walls were still standing. I had spent the night changing the locks and installing a Wi-Fi security camera system I'd picked up at a 24-hour store. At 9:00 a.m., my phone began to buzz. It wasn't my parents. It was Aunt Sarah, then Uncle Mike, then my cousin Bate. Alice, please come to Mom's house. We need to talk. Alice, your mother is hysterical. What is going on? Alice, don't be stubborn. Family comes first. They had called in the cavalry. My parents, realizing they couldn't bully me alone and terrified of Vinnie's noon deadline, had spun a narrative to the extended family. They were trying to use social pressure, the weapon of choice for the respectable suburban family, to force me to lift the Lee's pendants before Vinnie came to collect. I could have ignored them. I could have stayed in my fortress. But I knew that if I didn't kill this narrative now, I would be the pariah of the family forever. They would paint me as the greedy sister who let her brother get hurt. I needed to end this, publicly. I showered, dressed in my sharpest, meeting with a client clothes, a tailored blazer and slacks, and grabbed my file folder. I also grabbed my iPad. I drove to my parents' house. It was a 15-minute drive, and every mile felt like a march into battle. When I pulled up, there were 4 other cars in the driveway. They had convened a full tribunal. I walked into the house without knocking. They were gathered in the living room. Brenda was weeping on the sofa, clutching a tissue, flanked by her sister, Aunt Sarah. Cameron was standing by the fireplace, looking grim and noble. Jeremiah was pacing, looking like a ghost, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Uncle Mike and Cousin Bate were sitting on the adjacent chairs, looking grave. The conversation stopped when I entered. "She's here," Brenda sobbed. "Oh, Alice, thank God. Tell me you came to your senses." "I came to set the record straight," I said, my voice steady. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the room, clutching my file. "Alice, sit down," Uncle Mike said, his voice gentle but firm. Mike was the patriarch of the extended family, a man I respected. "Your father told us everything. Look, we know you love your house. We know you put work into it. But this is Jeremiah's life. We can't let a misunderstanding about paperwork stand in the way of his safety." "A misunderstanding about paperwork," I repeated, looking at Cameron. "Is that what you told them?" Cameron stiffened. "I told them the truth, that we had a buyer lined up to solve Jeremiah's debt, and you blocked the sale out of spite because we didn't ask for permission in the right way." "Spite," I said, tasting the word. "You told them I was acting out of spite." "Alice," Aunt Sarah chimed in, patting Brenda's hand. "We know you're independent. We know you're particular. But surely you have the money to buy another fixer-upper. Your brother is in trouble with bad people. If you don't release that title by noon, they are going to hurt him. How could you live with yourself?" The room was heavy with judgment. In their eyes, I was the villain. I was the cold, childless, career-obsessed woman hoarding her wealth while her baby brother suffered. I looked at Jeremiah. "Tell them," I said. Jeremiah flinched. "Tell them what?" "Tell them why you owe $80,000, Jeremiah. Tell them who the buyer is." It was a business deal gone wrong," Jeremiah mumbled, looking at the floor. "And the buyer is an investor." "Lies," I said. I opened my iPad and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker on the coffee table, a trick I used to play music during holidays. "What are you doing?" Cameron demanded, stepping forward. "Providing context," I said. I pressed play on the recording I had made of the call with Vinnie. "Where is my money, Jerry?" Vinnie's gravelly voice filled the silent living room, loud and clear. "Hello, Vink. And this is Alice. I don't know who you are, lady. You are attempting to purchase a property via a fraudulent power of attorney. I have a lawyer drafting an affidavit for the FBI." The color drained from Aunt Sarah's face. Uncle Mike sat up straighter. Brenda stopped crying and stared at the speaker in horror. I let it play until the end. "He has until noon tomorrow, or he loses a thumb." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. It was heavier than the silence in my empty house. "That wasn't an investor," I said, looking around the circle of stunned faces. "That is Vincent Morty, a loan shark. Jeremiah didn't have a business deal gone wrong. He gambled away $80,000 on online poker and sports betting. I have the emails to prove it." I tossed the printouts of the emails onto the coffee table. Uncle Mike reached for them, his hand shaking. And the misunderstanding about paperwork, I continued, turning to Cameron. They forged my signature. They used a power of attorney I revoked 2 years ago. They were selling my house, my $450,000 home, for $100,000. They were giving away $350,000 of my equity to a criminal to cover up Jeremiah's gambling addiction. I looked at Aunt Sarah. You asked if I could live with myself. I'm the only one here trying to stop a federal crime. If that sale goes through, we are all accessories to money laundering. Is this true? Uncle Mike asked, his voice low and dangerous. He was looking at Cameron. Cameron opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked deflated, suddenly old. We were trying to save him, Brenda whispered. He's my son. I'm your daughter, I shouted, the control finally cracking. I am your daughter, and you were willing to leave me homeless, to steal everything I worked for just to enable him again? You didn't ask me for help. You stole from me. Jeremiah started to cry. Real, ugly sobs. I'm sorry, Alice, I'm sorry, I was just scared. You should be scared, I said. Because it's 10:30, you have 90 minutes. What do we do? Aunt Sarah asked, looking panicked. We can't let him get hurt. I'm not lifting the Lee's pendants, I said firmly. My house is off the table, forever. I looked at Cameron and Brenda. You have a retirement account, don't you, Dad? You have a 401k, you have equity in this house. Cameron paled. That's our nest egg, we can't touch that. But you could touch mine? I asked. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They were willing to burn my future to save their retirement. If you want to save his thumbs, I said, I suggest you call the bank, or Vinnie, but leave me out of it. I walked over to the coffee table, picked up my iPad, and looked at Uncle Mike. I'm leaving. If anyone comes near my property again, I'm pressing charges. And Mike, I'm sorry you had to see this. Alice, Mike said, standing up. He didn't look at his sister. He looked at me with a new expression, respect. You go, we will handle this. I walked out. I didn't look back at my mother, who was now wailing, or my father, who was slumped in defeat. I walked out into the bright morning air, and for the first time in 24 hours, the weight on my chest was gone. The fallout was swift and brutal, but it didn't touch me. I learned later, through concise updates from Aunt Sarah, who had become my only contact with that side of the family, what happened at noon. Cameron and Brenda had drained their emergency savings and taken an emergency high-interest loan against their own car titles to come up with the $80,000. They met Vinnie in a parking lot and paid the debt. Jeremiah kept his thumbs, but he lost his safety net. Without my house to act as a buffer, the financial rot in my parents' lives was exposed. They were house-poor, living on credit to maintain appearances. The loan they took to save Jeremiah broke them. Within 6 months, they put their own house on the market, a downsizing they claimed was planned, but everyone knew the truth. As for the legal side, Marcus Thorne was ruthless. We didn't send Vinnie to the FBI. That was a card I kept up my sleeve just in case, but we did pursue the notary who had notarized the forged deed. She lost her license and faced criminal charges, rolling over on my parents to save herself. She admitted Cameron had pressured her. To avoid a felony fraud conviction that would have stripped Cameron of his pension, my parents agreed to a settlement. They paid my legal fees, the cost of the movers, and the replacement value of every single item that had been sold or lost. It wiped out the last of their savings. But the real resolution wasn't in the bank account. It was in the silence. I returned to my house. It took me 3 months to restore it back to what it was. I bought a new sofa. I found a new dining table at an estate sale and refinished it, the sanding acting as therapy. I painted the walls a new caul, or a soft, calm sage green, erasing the memory of the beige chaos. One evening, about 4 months after the incident, I was in my garden, pruning the rose bushes that Mrs. Jones had been so worried about. "They're looking beautiful, Alice," a voice called out. I looked up to see Mrs. Jones leaning over the fence, a warm smile on her face. Thanks to you, I said, walking over to the fence. If you hadn't made that call, I would have lost everything. I knew something wasn't right, she said, adjusting her glasses. You don't leave things unfinished, and you certainly don't leave without saying goodbye. I smiled, feeling a lump in my throat. My own mother hadn't known me as well as this neighbor did. I brought you something, she said, handing a Tupperware container over the fence. Blackberry cobbler, from my own berries. Thank you, Mrs. Jones. You know, she said, lowering her voice, I saw a car drive by slowly yesterday, looked like your brother. I stiffened. Did he stop? No, he saw me sitting on the porch with my dog and he kept driving. He looked rough. He's not my problem anymore, I said, and the truth of those words felt like a physical liberation. I have a restraining order. If he comes back, he goes to jail. She nodded approvingly. Good, you protect your peace, dear, you built it. I did, I said, looking back at my house. The windows were glowing with warm light. The new curtains were drawn. It wasn't just a structure of wood and brick. It was a testament to my survival. I had stripped away the rot, not just in the walls, but in my life. I had cut out the toxic beams that were threatening to collapse the whole structure. I was estranged from my parents. I had no relationship with my brother. To some, that might look like a tragedy. But as I stood there in the twilight, eating blackberry cobbler and listening to the wind in the trees, I realized it wasn't a tragedy. It was a restoration. I had restored my life to its original, intended state, peaceful, secure, and entirely my own.